Caroline Matilda of Great Britain was Queen of Denmark, and Norway from 1766 to 1772 through her marriage to King Christian VII. She was born at Leicester House in London as the youngest child of Frederick, Prince of Wales, and Augusta of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg. Her father passed away 3 months before her birth, leaving her to grow up in a relatively secluded family environment, far from the spotlight of the British royal court. She held the title of Her Royal Highness Princess Caroline Matilda, and was the sister of King George III of Great Britain. At the age of 15, she married her cousin, Christian VII of Denmark, in an arranged marriage typical of the time to strengthen political ties between nations. However, this marriage was far from happy. Christian suffered from severe mental disorders, rendering him incapable of maintaining a stable marital relationship, which paved the way for Caroline's controversial affair with the royal physician Johann Friedrich Struensee, resulting in the birth of a daughter that caused a major scandal in the Danish court. Marriage to Christian VII, a tragic beginning. In 1766, Caroline Matilda arrived in Denmark to marry Christian VII, who was then 17 years old. Christian suffered from severe mental instability, likely a form of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, making him erratic and unfit to handle the responsibilities of either kingship or marriage. His behavior was often bizarre and occasionally aggressive, and he showed no interest in his young wife. In fact, Christian spent most of his time indulging in personal pleasures far removed from royal decorum, including a notorious relationship with his official mistress, Anna Catherine Benhagen, known as Stuvlet Catherine, a courtesan from Copenhagen. This relationship caused outrage in the court, but was deemed more acceptable than any misconduct by the Queen herself. Caroline, arriving in Denmark as a shy and innocent young girl, felt lonely and neglected. She found no emotional or social support in her husband, quickly becoming isolated in Christiansborg Palace. In 1768, she gave birth to her first child, Frederick, who later became King Frederick VI. However, this event did nothing to improve her relationship with her husband. Instead, it deepened her sense of alienation, especially as Christian continued to ignore and mistreat her. The arrival of Struensee, the physician who changed her life. In January 1769, Christian VII returned from a months-long European tour, accompanied by a new physician named Johann Friedrich Struensee. Struensee was an ambitious and educated German doctor, deeply influenced by Enlightenment ideals, with a charismatic and commanding personality. Initially, Caroline was hesitant about him, but Struensee quickly gained her trust through his intelligence and genuine interest in her as a person, not merely as a queen. He was the complete opposite of Christian, a learned, courteous man with a bold political vision to reform Denmark. A romantic relationship soon developed between Caroline and Struensee, evolving into a deep love affair. This relationship was not merely an escape from her miserable marriage, but also an expression of her desire for life and freedom beyond the constraints of the court. Struensee became more than a lover. He became her closest advisor, swiftly exploiting Christian's mental weakness to assume de facto control over the throne. By 1770, Struensee was effectively running the country, introducing a series of Enlightenment-inspired reforms, including the abolition of serfdom and improvements for peasants. However, these reforms angered the conservative nobility, setting the stage for his downfall. In the summer of 1771, the royal court moved to Hirschholm Palace, where Caroline Matilda experienced the happiest days of her life. She lived a relatively modern life, free from the strict traditions of the court, alongside her son Frederick and her lover Struensee. On July 7, 1771, Caroline gave birth to her second child, Princess Louise Augusta. Although the child was officially recorded as Christian VII's daughter, everyone at court was convinced that Struensee was the biological father. The princess was even nicknamed Little Struensee, reflecting how obvious the affair was to those around them. This birth sparked a massive scandal, as infidelity by a queen was a grave crime, especially when it involved the question of royal succession. Caroline made little effort to hide her relationship with Struensee, acting with a noticeable sense of freedom that further fueled the resentment of the nobility and the Dowager Queen, Juliana Maria, Christian's stepmother, who sought to control the throne. Juliana saw Caroline and Struensee as threats to her influence, especially given Struensee's growing power over governance. Conspiracies began to form against the queen and her lover, using the moral scandal as justification for their actions. The fall, arrest and exile. In January 1772, Juliana Maria and the conservative nobles executed a plan to overthrow Struensee and Caroline. On the night of January 17th, both Struensee and Caroline were arrested at Christiansborg Palace. Struensee faced charges of high treason for his control over the government and his affair with the Queen, and he was executed in April 1772 following a sham trial. Caroline, on the other hand, was exiled to Kronborg Castle, where she lived in complete isolation. She was stripped of her title as queen and separated from her children, Frederick and Louise Augusta, who remained in Copenhagen under Juliana Maria's care. In May 1772, Britain, Caroline's homeland, intervened, pressuring Denmark to improve her exile conditions. She was moved to Celle in northern Germany, a territory under the Kingdom of Hanover, ruled by her brother George III. There, she lived in Celle Castle, but remained cut off from her children and had little contact with the outside world. She was only 21 years old, yet her life had been utterly destroyed. A tragic end, early death. In May 1775, Caroline Matilda contracted scarlet fever, a common infectious disease at the time. She passed away on May 10, 1775, at the age of 23, leaving behind a short life filled with tragedy. She was buried in St. Mary's Church in Celle, far from Denmark, where she had once been queen. Her death closed a controversial chapter in Danish history, but her story remained etched in memory as a symbol of a woman who sought freedom in a world bound by tradition and power. Legacy and cultural impact. Caroline Matilda's story has not been forgotten. It has inspired numerous literary and artistic works over the centuries. Her life has been depicted in novels such as The Queen's Physician by Edgar Maas, 1948, Converse at Night in Copenhagen by Karen Blixen, 1953, and The Visit of the Royal Physician by Per Olof Enquist. Dramatic works like Struensee, 1827, by Michael Beer have also explored her tale. These works often portray Caroline as a tragic figure, a victim of her circumstances, but also a courageous woman who defied the constraints of her era. Princess Louise Augusta, believed to be Struensee's daughter, lived a relatively royal life. She married Christian Frederick II, Duke of Augustenburg, and had 3 children, including Caroline Amalie, who later became Queen of Denmark. Despite rumors about her paternity, Louise Augusta was never stripped of her status as a princess and continued to play a role in Danish royal life. Analysis of Caroline's character. Victim or rebel? From a historical perspective, Caroline Matilda can be seen as a victim of her circumstances. She was a young woman married to a mentally unstable man in a foreign country, deprived of emotional or social support. Yet, from another angle, she can be viewed as a rebel by the standards of her time. Her decision to enter into an open relationship with Struensee, despite the immense risks, reflects a deep desire for freedom and love, values that were rare for a woman in her position. Her relationship with Struensee was not just a whim. It was an expression of her strong personality and longing for a different life. Political context: Struensee's influence and reforms. Caroline's story cannot be fully understood without considering Struensee's political role. As an Enlightenment follower, Struensee sought to modernize Denmark through radical reforms, including press freedom, the abolition of serfdom, and improvements for the poor. However, he was hasty and failed to anticipate the backlash from the conservative nobility, who saw him as a threat to their power. His affair with Caroline gave his enemies the perfect pretext to remove him, using the moral scandal to justify treason charges. This political context highlights how Caroline, despite being a queen, was merely a pawn in a larger political game. The tragedy of a young queen. Caroline Matilda remains one of the most tragic figures in Danish history. Her short life was filled with contradictions. She was a queen, yet lived as an outcast, a mother yet separated from her children, and a woman seeking love yet paying a heavy price for it. Her story reflects the challenges faced by women in the 18th century, particularly in royal circles where morality and politics were deeply intertwined. Despite everything, Caroline remains a symbol of a woman who tried to defy the constraints of her era, even if it cost her life.